1969, nobody outside of hardcore basketball fans will care about Coach K's last game 50 years from now. Okay, well, maybe that's true. But, you know, then I write him back with the, you're right. One, great to hear from you, brother. Second, you're right, it's bigger than the Apollo missions. And hopefully at that point, Scott got the idea that I was jerking around. And then I'll tell you that after Scott writes that, somebody replied to me with an emoji of somebody vomiting. So, so here we are. How are you, man?
I'm great.
It's good to see you, man.
Thank you for having me.
That was it. I DM'd you and said, man, you got to come on the show.
That was a great way to reconnect, Ellis.
Yeah, it really was. And, you know, that's going to be part of our conversation. I guess let me just start off with, you know, how are you? How are things?
I'm doing well, thank you. Father and a husband and a son and my wife and children and mother are all doing really well, so I can handle everything else that comes my way.
Yeah, that's very good. And I agree. And it's so interesting. You know, I think of you, again, one of the reasons I wanted you on when Steph and I were kicking around topics, I said, just talk about life. I mean, because, you know, we're going to get obviously to the music, and you're synonymous with it in Pittsburgh and so forth. On the flip side of it, though, you know, you've always expressed to me a consciousness, an awareness of what at least I consider important and not. And, you know, it makes it beyond just the business part.
Sure.
And so you had to experience, like all of us, the personal aspect of this over the last couple of years, and like many people, anybody really employed, various aspects from a professional.
Right.
I'm not going to ask you something, you know, that would, you know, take you into something too personal, but how was that journey for you?
It was difficult at times. It was uplifting at times. There was a silver lining to the cloud that I found. Like I mentioned, I'm a husband and a father. My wife Denise and I have 3 beautiful, healthy daughters, 17, 15, and 12. So, you know, we went through it with them, and a large part of it was dealing with, first of all, okay, they're out of school. You know, they're home all of a sudden, trying, after a short break, trying to learn online. It was a real transition for all of us. You know, we kept our distance. We did what we needed to do. We all stayed healthy. I have a 92-year-old mother who is in good health, thankfully, and she stayed healthy. And there were times where it was really scary, really frustrating, and but there were also times where it was wonderful. We spent more time together as a family. We played board games. After the first week, really, our manager contacted me and he said, would you be interested in performing online? And I said, absolutely. I said, this is what I do. It's who I am. I not only do it financially, but I do it spiritually. So I went on Facebook and started doing these Saturday night live from the basement.
No, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I think it was very important to do.
Yeah, thank you. And it meant a lot to a lot of people, and that was one of the silver linings of the whole experience. It brought my family together. Every Saturday night we sat around, we brought out the animals. My wife was the Ed McMahon to my Johnny Carson. And, you know, it was a bit of a variety show because you can't, you know, it's one thing to go up there and play music, but I had to make it more than that. And I did, and we did as a family, and it was wonderful.
Sometimes you have to, you know, you got to dig deep. Sometimes you got to get outside of your comfort zone. Sometimes you have to address just that it's awkward. But, you know, when you have something that doesn't come around but every 100 years, you can't expect it to be normal. And you just have to adapt and change. And I don't say just, because I'm not so sure what type of job I did. And so I don't say that in a condescending way to anybody. It was very, very difficult. I will tell you, I actually found when things were locked down a lot easier than 21. 21 was actually worse for me because there was a little bit more discretion and leeway, and you didn't know whether or not to jump in or jump out, and it just opened up some discretion that I didn't have to worry about when I was told stay in the house and barricade and all of that. And because then I'll deal with what's in the house. You know what I mean? So I don't know about you, but that was a lot more difficult for me the next year.
I found the same thing, especially when the kids got back into activities. You realized how much the respite was needed and enjoyed. And then suddenly it's like, oh, we're driving all over the place every night of the week, getting kids to and from activities, where for a while there it was just sitting at home.
I'm telling you.
It was kind of nice.
Yeah, well, I have to say, it gives you a pause. It gave I think, a lot of families the opportunity to address the elephant in the room. What are we going to do?
Right.
You know, what are we going to do? And I found that to be valuable, albeit with 3 boys all in college, which really at times transformed our home into a frat house. But that's a different conversation. At least they were at our house. You know?
Right.
And that was a good thing. You had mentioned the music and Facebook, and I have to say that you know, I remember when that came out, and that jumped off the page to me, because I found in, I guess, my story relative to how I addressed it, I had my hobbies all of a sudden change from this to, I started reading a lot or watching a lot of business news. I was captivated by the idea that there was so much innovation, there was so much pipeline material that all of a sudden got accelerated.
Right.
There were things that came out of it, like anything that's bad, where you have an opportunity. And so it taps into your creativity.
Right.
And so when I saw you're doing that, I thought it killed about 3 or 4 birds all at one time. Personally for you, on a number of levels for your fans. I saw a New York Times magazine from the Sunday paper 2 weeks ago. I was going to bring it. And it said, "The music that got us through." And obviously there's a lot of layers to that. But from your perspective, what did the music do for you to get you through, and for your fans and those who watched?
Well, for me personally, I reconnected with a lot of old material that I had written because I was trying to do a new show every week. So I really dug deep into songs that I had written 10, 15, 20 years ago, which was great. For our fans, I still to this day, Ellis, will get people every show I do, everywhere I go, "Thank you for doing the Blasement. It really helped us get through the pandemic."
There we go.
And that's all I needed to hear.
Yeah. And so when I saw the tweet exchange, I looked down and I had 3 or 4 of those magazines. That was the one on top. I said, I got to DM you and tell you to come on, because it just all sort of connected in that moment. When you speak to actors, I have a son who's an actor. When you speak to comedians, or read about them, you hear that different emotions produce material, content, mindset, sometimes different than what you did before. I'm assuming that applies to people who write music such as you.
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, a famous saying for songwriters, you write about what you know about. And, you know, for me, I actually didn't write a lot during the pandemic. I kind of was on input mode. And now suddenly in the last 6 months to a year, I've started to write more. The band is recording now. So I wrote a song called Stay, and it's really about a couple pent up together, evaluating their relationship. And the refrain is, "I don't think I'm going to stay." So, you know, that's what it did for me.
Right, yeah. I think that'll be something that actually is going to have a longer tail to it, because there were a lot of lessons learned that we're probably all still unpacking.
Absolutely.
And
it takes a while to process that stuff.
It does.
And then create art from it.
Sometimes
it's immediate, but I know for me personally, I have to digest it, and then it comes out after the fact.
I don't do art, but I do something that I think has some thematic consistency with the areas, as I mentioned before the show, such as comedy and for this matter, music, where you pull off those things. I mean, you know, and my job is the opinion business and the information business, and so you know, I had to take a particular deep dive into what was fact and what wasn't.
Right.
And then ultimately put that into a form that I had never thought about doing before March of 2020.
Right.
So again, I think it applies to a lot of categories, but some aspects of our silos, I think, overlap a little bit. I asked this question to a good lawyer friend on set the other day, Victoria Cush, and I asked her how much of what developed in the legal field, she's an outstanding attorney, in the legal field that unfolded through the course of the pandemic will carry over. Because all of a sudden they were doing depositions and hearings by Zoom and you know, all of that. She said 70%. And that struck me as a lot. I don't know whether there's a percentage from your aspect. It would probably just be great to be back out live and do what you do. But do you expect, either from a technical perspective or technological perspective, things that did arise that will carry over?
Sure. I think the advent of Zoom and those shows that I did, as well as so many other musicians did online, whether it was Instagram or Facebook or wherever, YouTube, the ability, and there is a cottage industry now of audio-visual people who, now that we're playing in front of audiences again, it's become much easier to combine that with an online show, to be able to stream that show for people who can't make it to the live show.
Oh, that's great. That's really great. Melissa Etheridge, I think, was one person that I recall creating something. I'm a big fan of her and her music, and really, frankly, a lot about what she stands for. So I found that, that was another one of those things that popped off. And I don't know if this is the right thing to say, but thank you and congratulations. I mean, because I do think it made a big difference for a lot of people. And important, I'm sure that you've heard that from your fans as well. All right, let's take a break. I want to come back. I do want to talk about where we are with the industry. I want to talk about where we are with live performances, what's ahead for the Clarks, and more right here on PCNC.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology.
Now, I'm going to pose that question here momentarily to Scott. Our good friend Mark Torbick writes, seeing the Eagles Saturday night, Ellis, I'd say it's rebounded, but it'll be interested to hear what SB's take is. So there's interest. What is it?
Well, it has rebounded, thankfully. The funny thing is, I will never forget when this all started in March 2020. We had a show scheduled for June at Stage AE, and our school district went out for 2 weeks initially, and we all thought, oh, we'll give this a month or two, and everything will be back to normal by June. And we'll be doing a show at Stage AE. Well, it didn't take more than a month or two to realize this is not going away soon. And this is going to affect not only the music industry, but any industry that relies on live audience. At least for the rest of the year. I remember saying to the guys probably in April or so regarding once we canceled the Stage AE show, I said, guys, this isn't going to come back until next year. I said, we probably won't be doing much. So we better prepare for that financially. We're a business, we're a creative entity, but we have to pay everybody. So, so 2000 was a bust. Early 2001, and then very slowly, people started to dip their toe back into the water, and last year was a little bumpy. We did some shows, and we got back in front of live audiences again, but it wasn't where it had been. But this year feels a little more normal. The scheduling of the summertime's a big season, obviously, for live music, so we've got our calendar full of shows, and hopefully it'll go without a hitch. Okay, so we're going to get to more of that in just a moment. I put a spotlight on this, and maybe this would have been better in the first segment, but forgive me. That's the beauty of these conversations, right? You said early on it became clear that there were going to be dramatic changes, personally and obviously professionally, and you guys had to make those changes. Very, very early on, I grew immediately concerned about what the mental health aspect of all this was going to be. It was just too dramatic. It was too all-encompassing a change, all in an environment where people can't agree what day of the week it is. I guess my thought would be, did you experience that, not you personally, but hearing from people? Was that where part of the gratitude came from people who were able to watch you in the basement, for instance? Sure, and the mental health aspect was big. As an adult who has been through, situations where you feel like you can handle most things, it really dealt a blow to me. I would watch the news, and I try not to bury my head in the sand, but I can't pay attention 24/7. I have a family to continue to raise. So, and I watched my children and how they dealt with it, and it was a big deal to them. They didn't have the life experience to be able to sort of process it or compartmentalize it to a degree and get on with their lives, and their lives were interrupted way more than mine was. But then I noticed, me personally, I sort of fared pretty well in 2020. I noticed the after effects in 2021. Even when things were getting back to more normal, I felt the effects of the pandemic hit me a much further down the road. And I didn't expect it. I was surprised by it, but I had to sort of come to terms with it.
To the extent you're comfortable, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask how so.
I just had this low-grade anxiety over it. And even though it felt like we were coming out of it, I remember getting vaccinated last spring, April, May, and feeling really good, and walking into a Giant Eagle for the first time without a mask on early summer. And then suddenly it felt like the clouds were darkening again.
Yeah, and that's what I meant about 21. It was a lot of that.
Right, and here we go again. And man, I don't want to deal with this again. I don't want my kids to have to deal with this again. But you put your brave face on and you go to work.
Yep, absolutely. There's a lot of power in that, not just personally and for fans or an audience, but I ultimately believe in the children. I think when the children in the house see that, the father going and mother going to work, there's tremendous value to that.
You have to be the rock.
Yeah.
I am the rock. I am the lighthouse in the stormy seas.
So sometimes, you know, you lose a gig. I know what that feels like. And I remember thinking the next day or Monday, after a conversation on Friday, that they were going to see me in a shirt and tie going somewhere. Right. Because I needed them to, you know, to see that. Right. As it relates to the industry, we had a guest a couple of times, I believe, on regarding, and I ultimately saw him in the local papers, and that is the independent venues really getting killed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's another part of the, this is what I meant by the long tail type of stuff. You know, there are places that are gone.
Right, and not coming back.
That's right. And so, you know, that was a big part of it. Now, the feeling when you get back in front of people after this, and after everything we just talked about, what's the vibe?
Oh, it was magic, those first couple of shows. Just being on stage, first of all, being on stage with the guys and creating that beautiful noise and that feeling that energy of 7 guys playing music together was pretty special. And then getting the feedback from an audience. And it still really is continuing. People are still thriving on live music. It really hasn't diminished at all.
That's wonderful.
It's amazing. I mean, people are, I think, not that they needed any reminder of how powerful music is and how important it is in all of our lives. Yeah, getting in front of an audience again was amazing, and it continues to this day. Like, every time I'm on stage, I'm just thankful that this is, I get to do what I get to do, and really, it saved me in a lot of ways from that anxiety that I might have felt, because my job is a creative outlet.
Now you really tapped into something. Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't mind telling you that there are many days, and have been since we were locked out basically for 90 days, where I have been vocal on and off the camera or on and off radio saying those are the best times of my day. Now, there are times that I'm thinking, well, what does that really mean? Yeah. But on the other hand, there's no question what you just said is true. I mean, and I think that while we like to believe we don't take things for granted, we take things for granted. Sure. And so the idea that, you know, you got in front of people again, I'm sure invigorated you for the reasons you said, but also for folks out there that are watching who took the whole thing for granted well before this. Right. And yeah, that really is interesting, because there's a creative component to it here as well. Oh, for sure. And that is a great outlet for it. Tell us about the new single. I know that it's online.
Sugarcane.
Yeah.
Great vintage Clark's kind of sound. Currently available on all digital platforms. Which is just a strange thing to say for a guy whose first album came out on vinyl. Vinyl and cassette. Yeah, right. Through this, you know, the golden age of CDs in the 90s. Yeah. To online things, and now really to streaming. Right. But yeah, available everywhere. Sugarcane is a really great Clark song, and also the way music is released now is changed. You know, you used to record 10, 11, 12 songs, make an album, and then But now it's, you know, you record a couple, you put out a single, and you know, eventually you maybe put out an album, but it's really not necessary anymore. It's more about the song. It's funny how it's come full circle. The 50s were all about singles. You know, you sold individual songs, and then it turned into an album culture in music. And now it's come back to being a singles industry again.
That's interesting, because I'm thinking about when you take a look at this is completely apropos to very little, but when I look at the songs on some of Springsteen's albums, I'm stunned that, I mean, any one in all of those songs could have been and were huge.
Yeah.
To have them all under one, and that's just one artist. So I'm going to leave you with this. I knew it was going to be fun, and I knew that you've got a lot of perspective on life that I respect, and I really, truly appreciate it. And I appreciate the time, and as I said during the break, it almost feels like we just started. Picked up where we were 2 minutes ago. And
thanks, Ellis.
Thank you so much. And
it was a pleasure.
You've got some summer things going on real quick. I mean, go to the website.
ClarksOnline.com is your best source for all that kind of stuff. Stage AE, I believe, June 24th, and we haven't been there since 2019, so that'll be that'll be big.
That'll be a little emotional, considering that was the one you had a can April 8th and 9th as well with Freddie Nelson at Craft House Stage and Grill. Thank you, brother. Thank you so much. God bless. It's really fun seeing you. All right. All right. That was good. Just what we hoped for.